Hello, beekeepers. This is Jake Beeman with Golden Fox Farms. Today we are in the apiary. It is the first week of September, and we're doing USDA sampling. I have the state apiarist Amanda Skidmore with me. I've been doing USDA sampling programs since I believe 2018. And these are available to all the states. Are usually operated by the state apiarist, where they will come out and sample hives for disease and inspect for problems and build a research database for use by the USDA. Bees that come out of this sampling process are used for disease analysis and national studies as well. Now, as we pull frames out of these hives, I'm also concurrently doing mite washes because it's pretty much the same process. Now, you'll notice we're mostly staying in the top boxes of these hives. They are double queen colonies on this stand, so we're actually pulling our samples out of the top boxes. And there's a bit of a process that happens to these frames once they come out. Now, watching this video, you'll notice Amanda's wearing gloves and using my hive tools. That is so if any disease is encountered in this apiary, it's from my own stuff. In her hand, she also has a small piece of comb. She carved that off the last frame. This particular USDA study also includes comb analysis. I'm going to keep washing this mite wash sample. Now, the importance of Amanda using gloves and my tools is she's not bringing any disease in or out to my apiary. She visits a lot of apiaries every year, and one of the worst things that could have happened is her be the disease vector introducing disease to other colonies. Here, Amanda's preparing this frame and its bees for sampling. A quarter cup of bees will go into a dry vessel that's actually a modified queen shipping box that will transport the bees alive to the laboratory. The other bees end up going into a alcohol mix for preservation that will also be shipped to the laboratory. The laboratory in question is the Beltsville, Maryland laboratory, and there they'll do the analysis for mite counts and disease numbers and all that stuff directly. The last thing she has to do is something called the tropy tap, where she'll actually smack the frame against this cooking pan, and at the end of this process, the pan is wiped, and that wipe is checked for tropolalaps presence. This is actually the second part of the sampling in this apiary where the hives were already labeled. Now, I don't have results back from this just because it takes a while for these results to get published, but I have results from this same apiary in a different sample series from last year. Let's look at test results in that same apiary from the year before. This sampling was done by our prior state apiarist, Dr. Tammy Potter. The first page is my identifier, my beekeeper ID. This is an APHIS program, so it has this nice little logo there. And the second page shows us what the apiarist found. There are 25 colonies in this apiary. We sampled 8 of them because 8's the normal sample size in the USDA sets. And we had no discovery of disease, at least from our visual inspection while we were there. Now, in the laboratory, when they got this thing, they found the liquid sample, which would have been the quarter cup of bees from each one of those 8 hives, had about 1,000 bees in it and had 50 mites in it. That comes to a mite load of almost 5%, which is a little high by most people's standards in September. You have to remember this is my Carrollton apiary, and that is an apiary I am frequently bombed and have mite spike numbers regardless of how well my bees are treated. And we see an interesting relic of that later in this data. Now, going further from this deeper into the form, they found no nosema, which is nice. I've had high nosema loads in prior sampling, depending on the apiary, mind you, and conditions encountered in that apiary. Also, no tropolalaps because, well, they aren't in the United States to our knowledge yet. Now, the next page here, this is table 3. This is the disease numbers they figured out through analysis, how much virus are in my bees. And it was great in some respects because I have 0 acute or chronic paralysis in this apiary. I had deformed wing, but it was a very low amount. You'll notice it's the second percentile. So 98% of colonies had more deformed wing virus than I do. But I had a relatively high mite count number in the yard. So that's kind of a disparity in the data. I have a lot of Israeli acute paralysis virus, which is not entirely unheard of. Remember, Israeli acute paralysis virus, it's here. We think it's in Israel. No, it's here. And I have a rather high percentage of it, even though I haven't seen it playing out in my colonies. Generally, if you have a IAPV outbreak, the colonies are dead in 48 hours. Looking further down, no disease hits other than Varroa destructor virus. Now, we expect Varroa destructor virus because I have a high mite count, and I'm in the 42nd percentile on mite count here. But it's even more interesting when we look at some of the graphs they have later on. Now, this graph is included. This is actually graph for all of the samples, not just my own apiary. It actually includes about 8,400 samples, and this gives kind of a general breakout of how often they encounter these diseases. Like, they encounter Varroa destructor virus in about 80% of the colonies tested. That is not unheard of. Said same for deformed wing virus. These are transmitted by Varroa everywhere. That's not unexpected. However, something I have, Israeli acute paralysis virus, they're only finding it in about a quarter of samples. So it's not nearly as common. And thankfully, chronic and acute paralysis viruses are also fairly low on this chart overall. Now let's also look at my specific hives and how they compare to national data trends. Now, our nosema chart here, I'm at the very bottom. It notes my sample was 0 out of whatever because I had a 0 nosema count, which is fine. Now, this is a fun one. This is my mite count. Now, notice I am way on the right-hand side of this chart on the mite count, towards the highest hits. I'm above the 75th percentile. Where am I on this? I'm probably cruising 85th percentile on mites in this apiary. So this apiary had more mites in the sample than 85% of the other apiaries sampled since January 1st, 2022. That sounds incredibly bad, and to an extent it is, but this is my apiary that gets bombed frequently. Now, the thing that Varroa does, it causes death by all the viruses it vectors. So we need to look at the viruses it vectors. Varroa destructor virus, which is also known as deformed wing virus B, and deformed wing virus. Those are what usually kill the hives. And we find a really interesting disparity between my mite numbers and my virus numbers. So looking at Varroa destructor virus, this is also known as deformed wing virus B, even though I had more mites than 85% of samples, I'm still only about 40th percentile for Varroa destructor virus levels. So even though I have a significant number of mites, my virus level isn't that high. That to me suggests the mites have came into these colonies recently. They're not persistent numbers causing persistent virus issues. That's even more exacerbated when we look at the deformed wing virus data. With the deformed wing virus data, I am at the very bottom of virus levels. So my bees are doing exceptionally well handling deformed wing virus on their own, even though I have this high mite count. That's a very interesting disparity. Now, one of the other bits of the data we can look at in here is my Israeli acute paralysis virus load. Like I said earlier, I have a rather high amount of that virus load, but you'll notice even though I'm at 60th percentile or so, it's still a relatively low number. About 25% of hives have far higher numbers. Notice how that curve just shoots off into the distance. I am well below the active levels of Israeli acute paralysis virus in these hives, even though I have a lot more compared to about half the hives in the nation. Now, USDA sampling is likely available in your area. It is paid for via grant, so it's not an unlimited thing. But you can always send your own samples to Beltsville for specific analysis. Like if you have a dead out, they'll look at it, see if it was Varroa-driven or nosema-driven, those kinds of things. To learn more about USDA sampling in your state, reach out to your state apiarist office. If you have found this informative and beneficial, please like and subscribe. And with that, I'll say good luck and happy beaking.